All right. Hi. Thank you all for joining us. We are here live with Angela Edwins to celebrate her newest book, A Dangerous Heaven. We're so excited you're here with us. If you're watching live on Facebook, feel free to leave comments on the page. We'll be checking that periodically. And if you're here on the Zoom, you can just type in the chat if you're watching afterwards. Thanks for coming around and watching afterwards, because we'll be putting this on our YouTube in a little while. Joining us also today, Angela has invited a couple of her poet friends to kick us off and get us in the mood. We're going to start with Adam Houle. He is the author of Stray, a finalist for the Colorado Book Award. His poems have appeared in AGNI, Shenandoah, Guest House, and elsewhere. He co-edits 12 Mile Review and teaches at Francis Marion University. And Adam, we're going to let you take it away.
All right. Karen, thank you very much for that introduction. And Joangela, thank you very much for inviting me to help celebrate the birth of the new book. I'm honored to be a small part of it. I'm just going to read 3 poems, and in honor of the PD region, I thought I'd start with a poem called Ruby, Prophet of Lada. Although, of course, I think it's pronounced Lada, but I've heard it like 7 different ways. Ruby, Prophet of Lada. At the leaky heart of the kitchen, Ruby toes the ripped linoleum. The tack didn't take. Heat or cold or crappy sticky back, factory defect, she didn't know, but she laid it right. She knew that. And hot shit if brother ain't at it with the axe handle again. One day, that dog won't flinch when he mocks to bring down the ash, stops short and laughs. A tick shy of her ladder-runged back. One day, she'll climb into her strength, the dog will, and Ruby through the window will watch it all go right for once. In the smoke off the stove, she is willing it right now. Brother cross-haired before the lunge, brother lost in dust, the uncoiled chain. It will look like an explosion far off and a wrestling match there in the rubble. You'll know her then, she thinks, and turns the graying chops. Second one I'd like to read is for my sister, a unbelievable Hulk Hogan fan. We were WWF at the time, WWF fans growing up, and my sisters and I are all packed in age pretty closely, and so we would do what we saw on TV. My sister, Hulk Hogan. My sister is on the top ropes, on the arm of our mother's good couch. She has been wounded badly, bounced off the ropes, clotheslined, pile drived, nearly pinned. But the crowds, my other sister, me, a raucous crew of rubber muscle men in Speedos have cheered her to her feet. She's feeding on our will, on our fever chants, on our wish she rise and take revenge. We're big on revenge in this house. And my sister, Hulk Hogan, tears open the shirt from her neck. She corkscrews her arm at the shoulder and pulls the shell of her hand to her ear to better hear us. She squats there on the top rope's turnbuckle and leaps, her hair rushing away from her skull as she turns in the air to lead with her elbow. That point, sharp as a crime, finds home in the throat of a once loved doll. And the last one I'll read, the title's pretty self-explanatory. Turnkey Kid. If by wind until it quits. You're there then to settle in, so settle in. If by bee, until it buzzes you loose from its hair elsewhere. If water, if bird, if running tuber, if by or else. If by barrel of a pretty gun, if by so what? If by tusk plowed under a new moon into a caliche wash. If by tableland, empty enough to set, serve yourself last, but serve yourself best. You land soft, you bloom early, you a turnkey solution irradiated. If by peccary hoof pressed in a riverbank, ready made, but always new and always in the making. Thank you very much, y'all. I really appreciate opportunity to share a couple poems, but mainly to celebrate Jo Angela. What an honor to read with you tonight, Jo Angela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. That was fabulous.
Yes, just great. The one about the wrestling and your sister, my brother and I were real big into the wrestlings. That was so much memory right there. All right. Next up, we have got Kristin Robertson, the author of Surgical Wing from Alice James Books. Her poetry appears in Plowshares, Kenyon Review, the Southern Review, the Threepenny Review, and Harvard Review, among many other journals. She is an assistant professor at Mercer University and now lives in Georgia. Take it away,
Thank
Kristin.
you. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I got to tell you, opening for Jo Angela is, I mean, we've been friends over 20 years, which is crazy to think about. She's one of my favorite people. She's one of my favorite writers.
You're telling our age, Kristin.
I thought it's well over 20 years, I think. I don't want to do the actual math, but yeah, so I've known her for a very long time. I've known her work for a very, very long time. And I am so excited for her in this book, and for opening for her is an honor for me. I'm going to do two poems, I think. I'm so excited that Adam started with the Hulk Hogan piece. I'm working on a series of poems about Jaws, the movie. It's one of my favorite. I'm not going to read a Jaws. No, I should read one of the Jaws pieces. I'm working on a series about Jaws, so he's encouraging me by writing about Hulk Hogan and pop culture. I love that line. We're big on revenge in this house. I mean, what a powerful. I love those poems. Thank you, Adam. Following those is great. I also love that detail, that the graying chops. What an image at the end. Anyway, I'm going to do two poems. The first one, I thought about Jo Angela. This one is we knew each other in Tennessee. This actually took place. This is a true story. It's from the Tennessee Aquarium. I was at the aquarium one day, and this is what transpired. It's called The Only Social Part of the Squid. The only social part of the squid is the indigestible triangular beak in a kaleidoscope with other beaks in the belly of a sperm whale. Squid just prefer solitude. But here we are wearing squid headpieces, long iridescent tentacles down to our jeans, the two of us a rare squid family. My daughter hops over to two uncephalopoded girls for hide and seek. And I strike up with their mother, the gorgeous new jellyfish exhibit. It's like graceful entrails in slow motion, its sunset hair. She says she isn't their mother. Their mom, her sister-in-law, recently killed herself. So she's filled the days with museums and movies and the aquarium with its 500,000 gallons of water. One girl lies under a bench, still as a stingray, save her chest rising and falling. The movers are packing up her house. The woman hides a tissue in her fist. Her other niece sneaks behind a larger-than-life cardboard reef shark, but my squid isn't with her. The exhibits have closed, so I duck under velvet ropes and wander down ramps. Once I'm underwater, I speak to a darkness I know all too well. They're beautiful. Somewhere, my only child twirls with tentacles like handlebar streamers. I know the mother is here watching her wide-eyed girls, their fingers and breath against foot-thick glass. Any ghost would be. Okay, the second one I'm going to read is this is one of the oldest poems in the book, Surgical Wing, and the reason I'm reading this is because I just started at Mercer in Georgia, and the dean came up to me because I had given her a copy of my book when I interviewed there. And she said, well, I got to this poem and I'm not reading any more of this book. She said, I have paintings of from Audubon all over my office. She said, I love Audubon. And this poem is really hard on Audubon, but plus she said it just freaked her out and scared her, so she's not going to read anymore. So I thought I'm going to read this. I'm going to go back to this poem. It's called Audubon Ate His Birds. He gassed them in his closet, and then he pinned their wings, feathers splayed like pick a card, any card. He posed them in plastic trees, and after his brush had cadmiumed the throat of the hummingbird, whitewashed the spoonbill, he roasted and swallowed the loves of his life. Like that boy from school walking his first date to the Golden Gallon, he tied her wrists together with his sweatshirt string when she skipped ahead and tried to run. Or the next one he locked in his basement, singing to her Percy sledge, singing, hold on to your precious love. In a tight-lidded mason jar, in a Dixie cup with a palm over it, didn't the neighborhood kids smother fireflies one at a time, dying like a turned down oil lamp? The Duke curtained his first wife, too soon made glad. And once a farm woman, madly in love with a farmer, dropped the rope tied to his waist as he groped through a blizzard to check the horses. Before her boot caught the braid's frayed tip, she imagined him captured forever inside that barn, pitchforking for her any rabid bat, any frenzied sparrow. Thank you. Congratulations, Angela. I'm so excited to open for you today.
Wow, excellent. Oh, such stark imagery in that poem. That was, yeah.
Thank you so much, Kristin. That was stunning. That was stunning.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Adam. It was great to hear your work too.
All right. Next up, we have Angela Edwins. I'm going to read her bio real quick. She has published poems in over 100 journals, including Calyx, New South, Zone 3, The Hollands Critic, and Mom Egg Review. Her chapbook play was published in 2016 by Finishing Line Press. She has received awards from Winning Writers, Poetry Superhighway, and the South Carolina Academy of Authors, and is a Pushcart Prize, Forward Prize, and Bettering American Poetry nominee. She lives in Florence, South Carolina, where she teaches at Francis Marion University and serves as the first poet laureate of the PD region of South Carolina. every year when we open up for our open reading period, we never know what to expect. And then sometimes you open up a manuscript and the very first poem just grabs you and says, whoa, hey, can't wait to read the next one and the next one. And Joe Angela's work just drew us in right away. The way that she just shifts the words and makes them just play with each other. And she just, every word is there for a reason. It just is beautiful to read her poetry, because you know that there's so much craft that has gone into each one of these poems. Each one is just a gem, and it's so hard to say, oh, this one's my favorite, because then you read the next one, you're like, wait, this one's my favorite, and then you read the next one. And so it's just the ongoing series of, this is my favorite poem now. And I wish I had a copy of the cover to show you, but we are sold out of her books so far. Thank you. We have more coming. Thank you for showing off those. Joe Angela's nephew took this stunning cover, and the photograph just, I think, is perfect for the work inside. So I can't wait. If you don't have your own copy yet, hit us up. We have more coming. You can still get one. They'll be here, I think, this week, and we'll get them out in the mail to you, or hit up Joe Angela, because I'm sure she has copies and would be more than happy to sign one for you if you asked her very nicely. So just thrilled to have Joe Angela as part of the Gnashing Teeth family. And I'm just going to give it to you, Joe Angela. This is your show. Just wow us with as many poems as you want. We're here for it.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Karen. I can't thank you and Jennifer and all the folks that you work with. I can't thank you enough. You guys have just been wonderful to work with. Such cheerful, encouraging editors. Can't ask for anything more. So thank you so very much for all the work that you've done. I know it's not an easy thing to do when you've got 1,000 other things to juggle. And I think you've got a farm and everything else. I don't know how you do it, but I do appreciate it. I should have thought more deeply about who I asked to read in front of me, because I should not have asked two people whose work is so stunning that it's going to make mine look extraordinarily pale by comparison. But I am extraordinarily lucky to have truly great poets as good friends, and maybe I've learned a little bit by osmosis of knowing these folks. Adam, and I should mention, since Karen mentioned the cover, and that my nephew he took the photograph and then did the artwork to make the photograph look what it looks like. It's a small city in Connecticut. I don't remember which one it is, but I should mention he is a giant wrestling fan, and Hulk Hogan was his hero as a kid. And he would always try to convince me. I never really, sadly, got into wrestling, but he would always try to convince me, because Hulk Hogan was born in our hometown. And he would always say, what kind of Augustan are you that you aren't a Hulk Hogan fan? So every time Adam reads that poem, I think of my niece and my nephew. So that always just touches my heart. And Kristin, that poem that said in the aquarium, I'd not seen that one before, heard it before. It's amazing. At first I was thinking, well, I have 2 cephalopod poems that I wrote because I saw a call for poems for a cephalopod anthology that I don't think they ever made. And at first I was thinking I should read a cephalopod poem, and then I thought, oh no, after that I'm not reading a cephalopod poem. But anyway, I don't know what more to say about how wonderful you two guys are. So thank you so much for reading ahead of me and setting the bar too high for me. But I'll stop prattling on and start reading some pieces. I thought I'd start with the poem that gave the collection its title. And my friend Lance has actually, I think, read the whole book, which I've got to give him a shout out for that. But he's been teasing me about the fact that when my students write something that's a typo that turns out to be kind of funny or unintentionally poetic, I always steal it from them as an inspiration for a poem. And that does happen quite a bit. See, he's already saying, ha, 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 yes. That does happen quite a bit. And so, you know, this is not one particular student. I've had tons of students misspell this word in this phrase, but there was one semester I had several students who were, for some reason, were using the phrase safe haven, but they could not spell haven. So it always came out as safe heaven. And I couldn't, you know, after a while I started thinking, well, what would a dangerous heaven look like? And so I wrote this short little poem that ended up becoming the title poem for the collection, A Dangerous Heaven. Was she happy to escape it? Such perilous perfection, a daredevilish nirvana, pandemonic peace. Was there a risk in leaving? Was she as likely to land in any hell as in safe heaven? Would safe hell have been worse? Or are they merely different labels for the same uneven terrain? Hence the squabbles for dominion between the fallen angel named Lucifer and the risen Savior who declared himself the light of the world. And speaking of names, I thought I would read this poem because one thing that I think all writers share is they adore language. And if they don't, they're in the wrong profession, I guess. And it's always, you know, I find myself thinking more often than probably is normal of words that I just like the sound of. A lot of them are names of plants and animals, strangely enough, I guess because so many of them derive from Latin and they have this kind of fluid, vowel-filled kind of sound to it. But I was like, well, I want to write a poem about words that I love. How do I do that? And I'm not sure that I succeeded very well because it ended up taking a dark turn, as a lot of my poems do. But I'm going to read this one. It's called Appellations. In the quiet of a kitchen table, in the morning, before another creature in the house is stirring, or else the loud beat of radio, motor, jackhammer, siren, and city traffic, or the in-between of an office desk, or bank line, or lunch counter, names of things come to you. The sounds of words you can't swear to the meaning of, sometimes ringing in your ears like forgotten favorite songs you never quite learned the lyrics to, but loved the melodies. Words that mean good things and bad. Words like amaryllis, tarantella, tachycardia, monsoon, elderberry, agapanthus, arpeggio. And soon enough come nations, towns, rivers, Tajikistan, Nacogdoches, Chattahoochee, and animals in familiar foreignness, armadillo, koala, cephalopod. And you wonder where the words came from. And you wonder sometimes where they go when people stop using them. Words like betimes, doxy, grimalkin, habiliment. And soon enough, you're considering silence. That valuable terror, that space between words on the page, or worse yet, the blankness after the final period, by which, of course, you mean death, without saying death to yourself. How did things turn this dark over words? And you being you, which is to say, you being human, being worried about what it means to be alive, you wonder, as humans often must, what death will feel like, when it will come. What happens to you after. And yes, go on wonder. We can't help ourselves. Who will be there to mourn you? What words will they say? I guess I didn't realize how much I do write about just words as words, but that does seem to come up a lot. And of course, Karen has commented on it. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize I did that as often as I did, but I guess I did. So I'm going to read the first poem in the collection, which has to do with words too, but there are several poems in the collection that are looking at biblical stories from the lens of being a woman or being one of the women involved in the stories, because so often we get stories in the Bible that make the women look like either objects or villains or just names and not individuals. So I took several women in the Bible and wrote some poems about them. And this is the first one, called Eve. How many words contain her name? Even, as if she had an even chance. Prevent, as if her sin weren't preordained. Of course, every, as she was the mother of it all, dark and light, yes, even the serpent, her writhing child, the birth of her undoing. Who can blame her? Not trusting the men, the father who commands without explanation, the mate who complains of the pain she left in his robbed breast. The prophet had him sounding thankful, proof the prophet thought himself a man. Any wonder she identified with a thing soon to be forced to crawl each day on its belly? But that's not right. She proved strong, as are all things built of bone. How else explain her choice to leave paradise, make no mistake, to bring a beautifully flawed world into being? Who else but this stiff-backed woman caught in the midst of both never and forever? I'm going to read one I've not ever read before, that I wrote some years ago, shortly after our college was undergoing something called active shooter training, although it wasn't exactly training so much as it was giving us information about the history of active shooters. And a colleague and friend of mine, for a good while, moonlighted as a law enforcement officer. And he had had to undergo active shooter training for law enforcement. And I can't remember who he said was doing the training, but whoever it was trying to explain what kind of psychological mindset the people in the midst of the situation might be going through, and told a story that was really a stunning story to illustrate that some people in the middle of a disaster sort of go on automatic pilot and just do what they always would be doing in that space, as opposed to running away or hiding. They just sort of do, if they're a cashier, they start working the cash register, if, whatever. And it seems so counterintuitive, but it really fascinated me. And he told a story about 9/11 in particular that I couldn't get out of my head. So that became this poem, or the last half of this poem. It's called The Concept of Order. As a species, humans live their lives in degrees of alarm. Mostly, for most of us, there isn't much. The world spins exactly as we have come to expect it, and caught wherever we are, sleepy plain or teetering city, our psyches adjust to whatever routine keeps us relatively free from harm. Introduce imminent disaster, and rules crumble. Consider the freeway when a hurricane hovers off the coast. Suddenly, all lanes creep inland. A library on fire is no place for whispers. Such inversions are just as they should be. But how explain panic without cause? The aging machinist who slings insults at the young immigrant, or much more dire, the scared cop who fires on the kid jogging home from the store with nothing on his person but candy and spare change. At least if we put our minds to it, we might unearth the wicked fear beneath such frailties. But what about this? Workers in their pressed clothes that bright September day who had felt the impact of the 767 against glass and steel, so many stories up, and took time to gather files, pack briefcases, shut down slow computers, as if it were 5 o'clock on any given weekday, not the dawn of Armageddon, not a slide to an age of search and seizure, not if they could not hurry down too many flights of stairs the last day of their lives. Or was it just that, a calm capitulation to the inevitable silence? If I must go, at least let me build this modest shrine to the concept of order. Pens corralled in a cup, mugs washed and dried and shelved, papers straightened and stacked neatly before the rendering to ash. I still can't get that image out of my head of people just, shutting their computers down and that kind of thing. And of course, some probably didn't realize exactly what had happened, but anyway, we need a lighter poem, I think. So I'm going to move on to a poem I wrote after, I think it was around the time that the Wonder Woman movie came out some years ago. And I'd seen a retrospective about all the versions of Wonder Woman over the years. And it was, I don't remember how long Wonder Woman had been around at that point, but it was called Wonder Woman at whatever, how many years, 75 or whatever. So I started thinking, what would a really elderly Wonder Woman look like? And so I wrote this poem, Wonder Woman at 90. And it's a poem where the title is the first line of the poem. Wonder Woman at 90 has lost a bit of her zoom. No more rescuing a sinking battleship full of confused, drowning sailors. No more squashing evil overlords like so many roaches in a hog trough. No, these days she's happy pouring water over thirsty tulips, lounging in bubble baths, sipping tea every afternoon incognito with Catwoman, who, it turns out, isn't the bitch that liar Batman always insisted. But don't be deceived. She's still Wonder Woman. She still keeps her bright eyes open. Just ask the cruel fool leering through the chain links at kindergarten dodgeball, or the blind date shoving his brogan in the door jamb. He tells the doctor that all he can remember is the flash of silver hair before the sudden pow, before the dull crunch of flimsy bone. Several poems in here that are about my mother who passed away when I was 25, not quite 25, in graduate school. And she was a magnificent mother in every way. She cared deeply for her children, probably to a fault. She tried to protect us every way she could. She had grown up in the Depression in Eastern Kentucky after the family's farm and land in East Tennessee had been flooded out by the TVA. And her father was a poor farmer. She had several younger siblings that she ended up caring for when her mother died of pneumonia when she was 14. And she and my father had a complicated relationship. I grew to understand that they loved each other pretty deeply as they got older and had medical issues that each had to take care of the other. But they did not always get along, certainly when I was a child. And my father had, I think, a lot of undiagnosed conditions, learning disabilities, depression, and he self-medicated with alcohol. So it wasn't an easy life for her, because she was trying to save him at the same time she was trying to keep us safe, me safe in particular, because my sisters were much older and had moved away by the time I was a young kid. But anyway, I was thinking about how she and my dad, neither of them were big readers. They would read the newspaper and that would be about it. Yet my mother had this facility with telling stories. She didn't do it often. She was often very busy. So you didn't have lots of time to sit down and just chat with my mom. But when you did, she would tell some stories. And it made me think about how mothers very often have to be storytellers. And so that's where this poem came from. It's another one where the first line is actually the title of the poem. Mothers build stories. With words the size of old growth planks, of massive bricks, shaped smooth and thick and sharp on edges, all to lift children to solid ground from slippery pits, to talk them down like scared kittens from high limbs and ledges, or simply to quiet them when night settles on its haunches, to rest, to roost like weary hens in soft nests of fog. Mother was a master of necessary invention, the spin of a tale to explain away suspicion, disappointment, disaster, the frail pain of failure. My sister, deemed too old to suck the rubber nipple, was told the mama owl in her supple wisdom, flew down in dark and stole away what an old girl didn't need, to give it to her babies, young and hooting the livelong day, so the mama never slept. My sister hushed her moaning, suddenly proud, suddenly grown. When our skeptic selves asked on the cusp of a bright Christmas how a fat man would deposit gifts in a house without a chimney, Mama pointed to the doorknob, whispered, Santa can blink twice, shrink without a word to the size of a feather on a hummingbird. Then he zips through the keyhole, the end of a thread, through the eye of a needle. What is it worth, this wonder her words purchased for us, this woman who read newsprint and grocery labels mostly, who worked in a world as practical as sawdust and red clay? The air she breathed bulged with smoke, dishwater singed her fingers, and when we whined in our soft privilege at boredom some summer day, she handed us shakers, told us in tones honest as a preacher's that if we only peppered a robin's wing, it was sure to let us catch it in our small, sincere hands. And we believed. Years later, grown and alone, I watched a mourning dove trapped in a stairwell, frantic wings flapping, her bloodied head pounding the plate glass window that loomed a gloomy joke above the muddy steps. Without thinking, I grabbed her, her warm heart beating a flurry in her purple breast. Outside, knowing she would die, I named her baby, held her curled and terrified in still hands as I imagined a world where my touch could make a gentle thing immortal. A story I built before spreading my fingers like wings, before I let go of that creature, her doomed and beautiful life. I want to read one more poem from the book, and then I'm going to read a couple newer ones because the book was assembled in 2018, and while a few things were tweaked here and there, pretty much all the poems in here were written somewhere before 2018. And I thought I would read a couple that are a little bit newer. But I wanted to end with this one because it's a poem that's set in South Carolina. And I grew up in South Carolina, the other side of the state in North Augusta. And then went to grad school and lived for a while in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I loved my time there. That's where Kristin and I met. And then came back here to work at Francis Marion. So I've spent most of my life in South Carolina and I love it, but it is a troubled state, as most everybody knows. And I wrote this poem after I had gone to Charleston for the first time after the Mother Emanuel murders. And I was there for a concert and just a little weekend vacation, and I was driving around looking for a restaurant, and I happened to drive past Mother Emanuel. And the church is on Calhoun Street, which anyone from South Carolina would probably catch the irony of that. John C. Calhoun, famous figure in South Carolina and American history, but notorious for arguing vehemently to maintain slavery and being a slaveholder himself. And as I was driving by, I saw a woman walking with her child, and she had the child's hand in hers. And so I ended up writing this poem. What happens in the poem didn't really happen, but it sort of represented what I felt, that, you know, seeing that woman walk with her child past the church just made me think that even in the wake of extreme disaster and extreme cruelty, human beings tend to find a way back to love, which astonishes me, because often we sometimes forget that love even exists when horrible things happen. But it's called Calhoun. On this street where once 9 people bowed in prayer were shot to death by an average madman, a child walks the puddled sidewalk 3 steps behind her mother. In her path, a crippled wren splutters half-winged, uncertain what to do if not fly. The child lifts to her chest this weary casualty of a summer storm it had no part in building. The mother, hearing her child's cries, takes the bird in one hand, the child's hand in the other, takes charge as if she knows exactly what to do. None of us behind them can know exactly what she'll do, but we can imagine kindness. We can imagine nurturance, rejuvenation. In this small world, boiled in its antique acids, such scenes unfold before us, just often enough to make us wonder if perhaps, in fact, there's love. So all that's from the book. And yes, I do still have some copies, although I just had to get in touch with Karen to order some more. So hopefully I'll be getting some more soon. I'm going to read 2 short poems that are not in the book, that are more recent than that. And then I will end, and I appreciate everybody hanging on and paying attention and even joining in this afternoon on a lovely Sunday fall afternoon when you could be doing anything. So I appreciate that. This poem is one of a series that I started writing for no apparent reason, about people getting struck by lightning. I don't know why that just sort of ended up becoming something that I was writing about, but it did. This one was inspired when I read about a man named Walter Summerford. And that's all I'll say about that. You can Google him later, because what happened to him was pretty amazing. It's called Stricken. It was published this year in Fall Lines, which is a journal that's put out by the Jasper Project in Columbia, which is a wonderful arts project, advocacy project that really supports South Carolina writers. Stricken. A man with summer in his name survived 2 lightning strikes 6 years apart, only to be struck in 6 more years by lightning. Surely the electric core of eternity loved him, this man who survived war, disease, paralysis. No surprise he died young. Perhaps less surprise he died, albeit slowly, after the last time the whip crack of a sudden squall wrapped him in its spiraling fire. Here's where the surprise lies. His tombstone, still lying flat and broken where it fell, was struck by lightning too. What can we do when what loves us cannot let us go until it's killed us? And sometimes even then, holds on too long, swaddles us like a greedy mother, then rips the pleated fabric, wrapping our memory. Lie, of course. We can do nothing but lie, a word whose smallness comes close to spelling out life. And this poem, I read it at a conference some years ago, and everybody was reading really heavy, weighty poems, which now I write plenty of those. So they were prefacing their readings with all these trigger warnings. And so I had to preface this with a trigger warning. It has to do with spiders. So if you're not fond of spiders, so I'm teaching a class right now where we've read 2 poems having to do with spiders, and one student in there can't even say the word. So I'm having to say things like that 8-legged creature. But it was written after I had gone down a YouTube rabbit hole of nature videos, and I stumbled on one that was chronicling tarantulas, and I had no idea until I watched that nature video that certain spider species molt. And it really was kind of fascinating. At the same time, it was horrifying to watch. They had to put it on time lapse because it's a long process. But it really was fascinating. And then when the new spider emerges from the shed skin, it has like a pale, kind of almost glistening texture to it until its body hardens. And it was kind of ethereal and otherworldly. So that's what this poem is about. The title is a word that's used to refer to insects that molt. I don't know if it applies to arachnids too, but it's called ecdysis, ECDYSIS, if you want to impress your friends with your scientific vocabulary. It's true that spiders shed their exoskeletons to give them room to grow. Look it up on the web, the slow process of molting sped up so many thousand times, the dark hairs of the tarantula giving way to a ghost white glow of new joints, coal black fangs left hollow as envelopes that bore bad news, the fresh bodkins white as an Osmond smile, because yes, everything old is sloughed off and left behind, that shadow self, that dusty X'd off calendar, the legs a jumble of broken pencils, the abdomen a hungry woman's empty purse. So much energy lost in birthing yourself anew, as Christ could attest, and the body unshrouded should not be touched. In time, the larger self toughens, thickens, hardens, but that push too takes energy. For some, the shell dismissed becomes consumed, the released cannibal a sort of suicide. But search another web, the one hung between old window panes, sheltered from storm and dissipation, and there you see what before now you assumed a weaver's corpse, but no, that weaver lives with her own thinning shade, a papery past escaped at last like a chained thief from a dungeon through the trap door of a broken carapace, and now she is stronger than before, which, as with most of us, means that much deadlier, that much more alive. So that is it. Thank you, folks, for sitting through my reading and listening to Adam and Kristin, who are wonderful, wonderful poets. I much appreciate you all, and particularly, again, thanks to Gnashing Teeth folks for all their hard work.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for those those new poems. Wow. So now we've got something to look forward to in the future for your next book.
Yeah. Ooh, if I get time to put that one together.
Well, I'm going to open it up real quick. Does anybody have any questions for Joe Angela or for Adam or Kristin? If you do, feel free to pop on or type it in the comments. Nancy Zace over on Facebook says, nice job, everyone.
Thanks, Nancy.
I hope I didn't mess up that last name.
You didn't. You got it right.
But any...
I have a question for Joangela. I'm wondering, Joangela, if you talk a little bit about how you ordered the book. I'm just really interested in thinking about like what you sort of considered in structuring it, or if there were pitfalls you found, or lucky coincidences of placement, or
Yeah,
anything along those lines.
I give all the credit for the current order to Karen and Jennifer, because they did some rearranging that I thought worked well. I struggled with it. I initially sort of ordered it so that I had several different sections that were prefaced by the voices of the women in the Bible poems, and tried to sort of move from, I guess, kind of, for lack of a better term, philosophical poems or poems that are contemplating like language or whatever, onto and it's still, there's some of that there, to at the end were more poems about my parents and my mother, poems that are sort of settled in the past and are more personal in nature. But I gotta say, that was the biggest struggle. I remember I was putting it together. A friend of mine was having some surgery in Charleston, and it was surgery that could have revealed she had cancer, but she didn't, thankfully. So I'd gone down there to be with her parents while she was in surgery, and the surgery got delayed. So I ended up staying in a Holiday Inn for a couple of days that I didn't plan to. And I just started throwing papers all over the hotel room and trying to figure out how, okay, will this one go here? Will that one go there? And so that's how the initial structure came to be. And like I said, I just was kind of feeling like I don't really know what I'm doing here. And so when Karen and Jennifer made some suggestions that made sense, I was like, yeah, okay, let's go with that. So that's how it came out to be what it is now. But that to me is the most mystifying part of book creation, is figuring out how to put it all together.
And I just want to add to that and say, Jennifer is a savant when it comes to book order. she really is. So don't give me too much credit. Let's give it to Jennifer.
Thanks, Jennifer. Oh, Bill has a question, I think.
I do. Well, I have dozens of questions, but I will, if you'll bear with one of them. It's so great to see you, Joangela, and Adam, you as well. Joangela, the ability of your poem, your capacity to hold complexity of your family, of South Carolina. I wonder if you could speak to, other forms of literature that hold complexity as well as poetry, if that's possible. I'm sort of agog at your poem's ability to do that. So,
Oh, well, I appreciate that. That's very kind of you, Bill. I think any form of literature can and does hold complexity. I think there are a lot of, I'm gonna give both Adam and his wife Landon Houle a shout out here, because I think they both have books out that do a fabulous job of interweaving ideas with individual stories. And one of my favorite poems of Adam's is about killing a wasp nest. And it's actually, Adam can answer this better than I can. I don't remember if it's a sonnet, but it's a formal poem. And but you don't necessarily recognize that when he's reading it aloud. And it reminds me, I did a part of my dissertation on Raymond Carver, whom I adore, and it reminds me a little bit of a poem of his that has to do with killing pests, and how you feel guilty about it, and it doesn't even have to say that it's a human fear of death that kind of makes you feel guilty about it, but it's there. You can see how that idea creeps into what seems like a description of something that the only scary part of it to the average person might be, I might get stung, but there's more to it than that. And Landon has a wonderful collection out where she has several interwoven stories of people that live in a particular Southern community. But it reminds me, I mean, obviously, I think anybody who writes Southern fiction is going to get compared to Faulkner, but it does remind me a lot of the way that Faulkner's universe, which is very tightly controlled and focused on this Mississippi community, it's human. I mean, it's just human experience. That's why we still, read him today, and people around the world read him today. So, I don't think I'm anywhere near the league of those kinds of folks and that kind of thing. But I think that's what all writers aspire to, is trying to find something eternal in their individual experience. And that's a hard thing. I don't think we even know it a lot of times if we do it, it just sort of happens. Thank you, Bill.
All right. Anybody else?
I'll ask a question if no one else has a question. Anyone else? I don't want to. Okay, I'll go for it. Joangela, you mentioned Raymond Carver. I was curious if you could name one author. I know you love Jane Kenyon, Elizabeth Bishop. Who informed this book the most? If I limit you to just naming one. I also was curious if it's a different answer. Who did you read the most when you were writing these poems? If it's different, sort of, who would you name?
Yeah, that's hard to say, because some of these poems are 20 odd years old. And some of them are just 5 years old, right? And so I've read a whole bunch of different writers. Bishop always is going to be very, very close to my heart. I don't think I realized how much I admired Bishop until after grad school, or I probably would have done a dissertation on Bishop. But I adore Bishop. I adore I was in a little online fight yesterday between two people who are arguing for Plath or Sexton, and I like both of them, but I'm really a Sexton fan. So I'm always amazed at how she was a troubled and complicated individual, but her poetry just, to me, is just so well crafted to be something that too many people will look at and just think, oh, that's telling a story about your life, but it's not. It's doing so much more, and it's just terribly well crafted. Dorianne Laux, I love her work. Ross Gay, I love his work. Lucille Clifton, I can't say enough about Clifton. I adore Clifton's work. And of course, yes, Jane Kenyon, Ray Carver, Donald Hall, Tess Gallagher, they're the ones I did my dissertation on, so they're always somewhere in the background of my mind. It's just, and it's funny how often sometimes I'll just be reading something, any random book of poetry, and something about it will make me want to write something. And I'm sure you guys have probably had that experience too, that sometimes people will say, well, how do you get out of writer's block? And I don't really have writer's block. I have times when I don't write because I'm too busy with other things, but if I'm ever having writer's block, I just pick up a book and read it, and I start writing something. It may be crap what I write, but at least I'm putting something on the page. I'm not staring at a blank sheet and not doing anything. So I just think we all are in a conversation with those who wrote before us, and it's hard to be alive and also to read what people have written and not have something to say about it. So.
Well, I have a question for you. Knowing that you have poems from such a broad time period, but they all are so fresh. I mean, how did you go through some of your older poems and bring those into the newer poems?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, part of it was I mentioned in a outdoor reading I was doing yesterday that I have a lot of angry woman poems. And I do. I think that to a degree that there was a kind of women's experience flicker in the background of how I was ordering it. I mean, obviously not everything in the book is about that particular angle of experience, but I think that was part of what it's like, well, what have I written that kind of touches on these themes? And I also knew that I had a lot of poems about my mother's life. I had an unpublished chapbook about my mother's life that I really wanted to get some of those poems out there because, the part of Tess Gallagher that I think resonates with what I do is that poetry is a way to process grief. And poetry is to some degree a kind of way to access the eternal, I think, and for those who are spiritual in any way but not necessarily religious, I feel that poetry, like so many forms of art, will be a way to get to whatever it is that makes us all divine in some way. And I wanted to get to that with regards to my mom, because I'd been having a conversation with her in my head for as long as it had been since she'd passed away. And so I knew I wanted some of those in there. And then it occurred to me that some of what I see about her reflects some of the issues that I see with how women have been treated for centuries and how women are portrayed in the Bible. And because she had an interesting spiritual journey of her own, because she ended up converting to Catholicism when she was in nursing school and almost became a nun, but decided she wanted kids. And she never went to my dad's church because he was Baptist and we were raised Baptist. But when she got married, they had to go to his preacher's house to get married because they wouldn't marry her in the church. And she used to every so often say to me, these darn Baptists, they wouldn't be Christians if it weren't for the Catholics. And so there was always, these kinds of questions of who gets to decide the rules that's in the background. And are those rules always good? Are they always bad? Or there's something in between? So a lot of that also, I think, came into play with it. But a lot of what I do is intuitive. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So.
Well, I would argue that you do know what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. That makes one of us. Thanks, Bill.
Does anybody have anything else? So, all right. Well, guys, I want to thank y'all so much. So much. Thank you for our opening readers, Adam and Kristin. Y'all were just wonderful. Thank you so much. And I've definitely got to look into some more of y'all's work, add some more to my TBR pile.
Definitely. You need to. They're good writers. You need to check these folks out.
Absolutely. And Joe, Angela, wow. Thank you so much for just allowing us to share your work with the world. We just feel like a little tiny part of your bigger story. So
I'm a tiny part of your bigger story. I'm so happy there are small presses out there who are still doing good work and are plugging along in this scary publication landscape that we live in today. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you all. And feel free to share this video. Follow us on our YouTube. It'll be up a little bit later. All you got to do, Gnashing Teeth Publishing, we're kind of everywhere. You can find us wherever you find poetry.
Exactly.
And thank y'all so much for coming today. Y'all have a great one.
Thank you.